Ashley Renee Lyons was born on July 21, 1985. She was the youngest of her parents' 3 children. A native of Scott County, she was a member of the Cedar Grove Baptist Church and a 2003 Scott County High School graduate, in which she was very active in the FFA program. The letters FFA stand for Future Farmers of America. FFA is a dynamic youth organization that changes lives and prepares members for premier leadership, personal growth, and career success through agricultural education. Ashley's brother, Chris, was only a year older. They had a small car repair shop. They grew up repairing not only cars, but also everything that has an engine. Ashley liked cars, especially the fast ones. But Bobby Gibson, Ashley's best friend, knew that cars weren't the only thing Ashley was interested in. She was in love with Roger McBeath. The teenagers in love broke up shortly after the prom but remained close friends. Even though they broke up, Ashley still thought Roger was the best. She was thrilled when she graduated high school, believing a better life awaited her. However, the lives of young people do not always turn out the way they plan. Ashley found out that she was pregnant and the father of her child was Roger. She did not hide it from her family. Her whole family supported her, looking forward to the baby's birth, but January 7, 2004 changed the lives of many people. That day started perfectly, but ended tragically. At the doctor's appointment, Ashley found out that she was going to have a son. She was happy when she shared this news with her mom, Carol. She even chose a name and wanted to name her son, Landon. Ashley couldn't wait to share this exciting news with everyone. After showing her mom the ultrasound picture, she took a shower and did her makeup and hair. Ashley told her brother Chris and her mom Carol that she was going to Lexington. If we look at the map, we can see that Lexington is about 20 miles from Stamping Ground, and Ashley would have gotten there in about 35 or 40 minutes. She said she had plans to meet Roger and his parents at a restaurant there. Ashley was going to show them the ultrasound picture. It was cold that evening, and it was expected to snow later. Ashley's mom, Carol, offered to take her car, but she refused, saying she wasn't going for long and would be back before the snow started. Recalling that day, Carol said that the last words she heard from her daughter were, "I love you, Mom. I'll be back soon." But unfortunately, that night changed the lives of the Lyons family forever. After dinner, they heard the phone ring in their house. Chris answered it and heard Roger's voice asking if Ashley was home. Chris replied that she had already left. Roger said he would not be able to meet with Ashley. He said he called her, but she didn't answer the phone. Chris assumed that Ashley had left her phone in the car and gone to the restaurant. Time passed, but no one could get in touch with Ashley. Her mother called her several times, but she didn't answer. It was already 8 p.m., but Ashley still wasn't home. But when she left, she said she wasn't going for long. At about 9 p.m., Carol called Roger's mother and said that Ashley had not returned home after meeting them at the restaurant. Roger's mother's answer surprised Carol and made her even more worried. She said they did not see Ashley that day because the meeting had to be canceled. Upon hearing this, Carol was horrified. If her daughter wasn't at the restaurant, then where was she? Carol had a bad feeling. After all, Ashley wasn't answering her phone. A lot of thoughts raced through her mind as she tried to figure out where Ashley was and if she was okay. Around 10 p.m., Chris and his father decided they couldn't just sit and wait and went looking for Ashley. They knew which restaurant Ashley was supposed to meet Roger and his parents at. When they arrived there, they didn't see Ashley's car. They searched for Ashley for several hours, but she was nowhere to be found. At some point, Chris decided to check out Scott County Park because he knew Ashley liked that place. She fed the ducks there all the time and often went there with Roger when they were a couple. Looking at the map, we can see that Scott County Park is about 10 miles from Stamping Ground. While driving around the park, Chris and his father saw a car similar to Ashley's. The car was running and had the lights on. As they got closer, they realized it really was Ashley's car. It's hard to imagine what thoughts they had at that moment. Chris ran to the car and saw that the driver's side window was down. Ashley was sitting in the car with her head down. She was wearing a seatbelt and was unresponsive. Chris opened the door and started shaking Ashley. He hoped she was just sleeping, but then Chris looked at his hand and saw blood. He immediately called 911. Unfortunately, by the time Chris called 911, Ashley was already dead and doctors couldn't help her. Soon after, Ashley's mom heard the worst news of her life. She couldn't believe Ashley was gone. While Ashley's family was overwhelmed with grief, the investigators arrived at the crime scene. Since Ashley was dead before the ambulance arrived, and since it was evident that her death was the result of a crime, her body remained in the car until the investigators examined the scene for possible evidence. The first thing they noticed at the scene was that the engine was running, the heater and radio were on, and the driver's side window was down. They quickly determined the cause of Ashley's death. There were 3 9mm shell casings on the ground next to the car. Ashley had gunshot wounds to the head and neck. The police searched the park, but couldn't find the weapon of the crime. The fact that someone shot Ashley through the open side window of her car was a clue. It was chilly that night, and the fact that the window was down was suspicious. The position she was sitting in indicated that she was not trying to defend herself or escape. Putting all this together, the investigators concluded that Ashley knew the person who shot her. It was cold, and the heater in her car was on, which meant Ashley rolled down the Nothing like this had ever happened in Scott County before. Therefore, the community demanded that the police find the one who took 2 lives in such cold blood. The investigators learned from Ashley's parents that she planned to meet with Roger, the father of her child, on the day she died. They talked to Roger, and he was devastated by the death of Ashley and their unborn son. Roger admitted he and Ashley had their ups and downs. However, they were no longer a couple when Ashley found out she was pregnant. Roger was crying when he talked to the investigators. The man had no idea who could have done this to his ex-girlfriend and their unborn son. They brought him in for questioning. When asked about the events preceding Ashley's death, Roger told the investigators that they had planned to meet at a restaurant, but he had to cancel because he had other things to do. He wanted to tell Ashley not to come to Lexington, but she didn't answer her phone. He called her twice, but she didn't pick up. Therefore, Roger called her home, and Chris answered the phone. According to Roger, he asked to tell Ashley to call him back when she gets home. Roger's story matched what Chris had told the investigators about his sister's plans for that evening. When Carol found out that the police had questioned Roger, she did not believe that he could be involved in this crime. Carol said Roger was a nice guy. Their families were on good terms. When Roger had dinner at their house, he always helped clear the table. He got along well with Chris and was often at their home when he and Ashley were in a relationship. So no one believed that Roger could be the one who took the lives of Ashley and Landon. While the investigators were searching for clues and a suspect, Ashley's family tried to figure out who could have done it. Carol found a diary in her daughter's room. In it, she wrote down her experiences. Reading the diary, Carol noticed that one name kept coming up in it: Dina Williams. Dina was the same age as Ashley. They went to school together and rode the school bus together. Ashley felt sorry for Dina because she grew up in a poor family and always wore the same clothes. There were rumors that her parents treated her badly and even beat her, and Dina confirmed them in conversations with her friends. At first, Ashley and Dina were friends, but as it turned out, Dina was jealous of Ashley and wanted to have everything Ashley had, including Roger. In her diary, Ashley wrote that she and Dina had several quarrels. From this diary, Carol learned something she didn't know about. She had no idea Ashley and Dina had problems in their relationship. Therefore, Carol started suspecting that Dina Williams had something to do with Ashley's death. After Ashley and Roger broke up, Dina wasted no time and immediately began dating Roger. And perhaps Dina was worried because Ashley got pregnant with Roger's baby. After all, she didn't want to share Roger with anyone else. Dina wanted him all to herself. Maybe this could have pushed Dina to do something that cannot be undone. Carol gave Ashley's diary to the investigators so they could analyze everything written there. Carol was sure that the key to solving this case was somewhere in the pages of this diary. When the investigators reviewed Ashley's journal, they also became interested in how she described her relationship with Dina. Thus, Dina Williams was taken to the police station. She denied any involvement in what happened to Ashley. Dina worked at a bank, and according to her, they had an office party on the evening when the crime occurred. So she had an alibi. Dina did not try to hide her attitude towards Ashley from the investigators. She especially didn't like the fact that Ashley was pregnant. However, the fact that Dina did not feel anything about Ashley's death was not enough to bring any charges against her. So the investigators let her go home after the conversation. Meanwhile, the results of the ballistic examination came in. The experts analyzed the location of Ashley's wounds, the position she was found in, and where the casings lay. The angle at which the bullets entered Ashley's body allowed them to determine the approximate height of the shooter. They believed that the perpetrator was about 5 feet and 10 inches tall. Dina Williams' height was around 5 feet and 5 inches, which meant it was unlikely that she was the one who shot Ashley. However, Dina had a twin brother, Thomas Williams, who matched the alleged height of the perpetrator. According to rumors, a few months before Ashley's death, Thomas had asked several people about how to cause a miscarriage. People also said that Thomas did everything his sister asked him to do. The investigators became interested in this and questioned Thomas Williams, but he denied everything and there was no evidence indicating his involvement in the crime, so he was released. While the police were putting all the evidence they had together to find the culprit, residents wanted to do something to show their support to Ashley's family. They created an improvised memorial with flowers, stuffed toys, and candles. Someone brought 2 crosses, one with Ashley's name and the other with Landon's. While the investigators were looking for new evidence, Ashley's family was preparing for the funeral. It is impossible to imagine what they had to go through because they lost 2 people at once. During the autopsy, the medical examiner removed the fetus from Ashley's body. Ashley and Landon were buried in the same coffin. The fact that the one who committed this crime was still at large made the Lyons family even more devastated. For information that could help arrest the one who took their daughter's life, Ashley's parents put out a $3,000 reward that eventually went up to $5,000. People started calling the police and telling them what they thought might help the investigation. Soon after, they received a call from a woman whose house windows overlooked the park where someone shot Ashley. She reported that she may have seen the perpetrator. Standing at the window, this woman saw someone run out of the park and jump over the fence. Next, the person she saw ran up to a red pickup truck waiting for them with the engine running and got into the passenger seat. Moments later, the truck sped away. According to the witness, it was a red Chevrolet pickup truck. If the person the woman saw really had something to do with Ashley's death, then investigators had to look for not one criminal, but at least 2. After all, whoever was driving the red pickup truck could be an accomplice to the crime. Upon hearing about the red pickup truck, everyone who knew Ashley immediately realized who was behind it. Roger, her ex-boyfriend, the father of her unborn child, had such a car. The police immediately seized Roger's truck. They thoroughly searched it, but found no evidence inside. Roger refused to talk to the investigators, and there was no evidence against him. However, knowing that at least 2 people were involved in the crime, the officers made an obvious conclusion. Who didn't like Ashley? Who wasn't happy about her pregnancy? Who would be happy if Ashley disappeared? Besides Roger, there was only one person who could wish for this, and this person was Dina Williams. That's why the investigators decided to have another conversation with Dina and her brother Thomas. They questioned Thomas first. During the first conversation with the police, Thomas denied everything. But now, having learned that the eyewitness saw Roger's pickup truck at the crime scene, he became more talkative. When asked if he knew who shot Ashley Lyons, he immediately replied without hesitation that it was Roger McBeath. Thomas Williams eventually made a deal with the investigation to secure a less severe sentence for himself. He confessed that he had given Roger the gun, and Roger was the one who shot Ashley. Thomas also told the investigators that after taking Ashley's life, Roger threw the weapon in Elkhorn Creek. It took a lot of time for the police to find the crime weapon, but the 6-hour dive search was successful. The ballistics examination confirmed that the gun the police found was the weapon of the crime. The investigators knew that it wasn't Dina who shot Ashley because she didn't match the height of the perpetrator. However, they questioned her again, and she confessed that she was the getaway driver on the evening when Roger committed the crime. The police arrested Roger McBeath, Dina Williams, and her twin brother, Thomas. It became clear that Roger did not want Ashley to have the baby. But Ashley was happy. She wanted to become a mother, and her family supported her decision to have this child. So Roger came up with an insidious plan. He invited Ashley to meet him and his parents at a restaurant to lure her to Scott County Park. Dina Williams drove him there, and he walked up to Ashley's car with a gun in his hand. Seeing the father of her unborn child, Ashley rolled down the window and reached into her purse to get the ultrasound pictures. She didn't expect him to shoot her. By pulling the trigger 3 times, Roger took the life of both Ashley and his own son. Then he ran out of the park, got into the pickup truck, and told Dina to hit the gas. On the way, they made a stop and got rid of the gun, throwing it into the river. When it became known who was behind this crime, the residents of Stamping Ground were shocked. They didn't expect that someone they knew would be capable of such a brutal crime. Equally frightening was the fact that several people were involved in this. Roger McBeath pleaded not guilty. In preparing for the trial of McBeath, the authorities made a mistake, ultimately influencing the verdict. But I'll tell you about this at the end of the video. As for Thomas Williams, the court sentenced him to 7 years in prison for his involvement in this crime. In the plea agreement, Williams admitted he accepted $1,000 from Roger McBeath Jr. to injure Ashley Lyons in such a way that it would cause her to miscarry. The act was never carried out, with Williams then agreeing to give McBeath the gun used in the murder, according to court records. In 2005, Dina Williams pleaded guilty. As part of the plea agreement, prosecutors have recommended Williams serve a total of 20 years in prison, making her eligible for parole after she has served 85% or 17 years of her term. During the trial, prosecutors planned to put several witnesses on the stand who claimed Williams said she wished Ashley Lyons was dead, had plotted with McBeath to poison Ashley, and had offered people $1,000 to cause Ashley to miscarry by beating her up, the court document said. According to prosecutors, Williams and McBeath resorted to more drastic measures after their original plans failed. Williams said her attorney, public defender Rodney Barnes, told her a jury would probably have found her guilty. "I'm hurt, and I'm scared because I pleaded guilty to something that I didn't do," she said. Williams acknowledged she took McBeath to the park the night of Ashley's murder so he could view the ultrasound pictures of the couple's unborn son, but said she drove around the Colony subdivision while they met and later came to pick him up. She heard 3 gunshots during her drive, but at the time, she did not know what they were, Williams said. "He involved me in the plan without me knowing," Williams said of McBeath. Williams said Roger then called Ashley Lyons on his phone, telling her he loved her and was sorry he had missed meeting her at the park. The jury heard the recording of this message at McBeath's trial. According to Williams, when leaving the park, McBeath never told her that Ashley Lyons was dead, and she never told police about what had happened for fear of what McBeath would do, saying he was abusive toward her. "I was scared to death of that boy," Williams said. "He even threatened to kill me." Williams said she regretted everything that happened and felt terribly for the Lyons family. "I am so sorry," Williams said, crying. "I wish I could go back and change this." However, McBeath's parents, Roger Sr. and Rita, said that Williams was lying, calling her a compulsive liar who often acted in the heat of the moment. The couple said Williams was jealous of Ashley and had agreed to the plea deal to take the easy way out. "She was obsessed with my son," Rita McBeath said. "She was the one who had the motive." When they later got the call that Ashley Lyons was dead, Roger McBeath Sr. said his son was in shock, but Williams was unfazed. "It didn't bother her," he said of Williams. "It didn't bother her a bit." In August 2005, the court sentenced Dina Williams to 20 years in prison. She was released on parole in 2021. In the written motion, Williams said she was very young and easily persuaded by her then-boyfriend McBeath. Williams also said she had no knowledge of the relationship between McBeath and Lyons. Furthermore, Williams said she was not the main offender of the crime and has already served approximately 70% of her sentence for her role in the crime. Williams noted in the court filing that she had completed various programs in prison, including courses on anger management, resident legal aid training, horticulture landscaping, and how to be a certified Braille transcriber. After his arrest, Roger pleaded not guilty to the murder charge. The jury convicted him, but he managed to get his conviction overturned by the Kentucky Supreme Court because a jail informant overstepped his bounds by questioning McBeath in jail about the shooting, and the defense was not allowed to question the informant. John Romano, a jail informant, was instructed by the police not to ask Roger McBeath questions about the crime he was accused of. The informant was allowed to have ordinary conversations with McBeath about everyday things, such as sports and movies. The police hoped McBeath would start talking about the crime himself without the leading questions. The Kentucky Supreme Court ruled prosecutors used illegally obtained evidence and overturned the verdict. In 2009, Roger was retried, and this time he pleaded guilty to complicity to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. The court then handed him a 42-year prison sentence with eligibility for parole in 16 years. The court also sentenced him to 5 years for complicity to evidence tampering, which would run concurrently with his previous sentence. McBeath's parole hearing took place in December 2023. "She was my high school sweetheart. She was the mother of my child. She was someone I loved," said McBeath. McBeath told the parole board he was not interested in parole. "I'm not here to convince you all to give me parole. I know I don't deserve it," said McBeath. "But I do want to use this time to say that I'm truly sorry for what I did. I want to tell Ashley's family that I'm truly sorry for what I did. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about it." McBeath said he didn't wish to continue the hearing after declining his parole eligibility. Thus, he is currently still in prison. In honor of Ashley Lyons, Scott County Park, where she died, now has the Angel Garden with ceramic angel statues. After Ashley's death, Carol and her husband, Buford Lyons, helped pass a fetal homicide law at both the state and federal levels. Under the bill, violence against a pregnant woman is considered 2 crimes, one against the woman and the other against her unborn child. Rosana Galliano was born in the late 1970s in Buenos Aires, Argentina. She was the youngest child, with 2 brothers named Oscar and Gustavo, and a sister named Monica. Her parents were Reynaldo and Graciela. The details of her childhood and teenage years are a bit of a mystery, but it is known that she finished high school in the late 90s. During this time, Rosana's dad, Reynaldo, worked as a mechanic. Early in 2001, Jose Arts showed up at Reynaldo's workshop. Jose was born on November 22, 1948. He had lived abroad for over 30 years in places like Greece and the United States, where he even spent 4 years in prison for drug trafficking. Eventually, Jose returned to Argentina in 1996, owning 8 properties in a posh area of Buenos Aires. Jose and Rosana met when he brought his vintage car for repairs at her father's shop. Despite the significant age difference, they started dating quickly. At that time, Rosana was unemployed and quite reserved. Jose appeared to be financially stable, but in reality, his wealth came from his mother, Elsa, who was still in the United States. When Jose, at the age of 52, proposed to 22-year-old Rosana, her mother, Graciela, questioned if he was too old for her daughter. Jose argued that love knew no age. Looking for assurance, Graciela turned to Rosana, who, in a whisper, confirmed her desire to marry him. The couple got married on November 17, 2001, after just 7 months of dating. Jose claimed that his cheerful, modern, and smart personality won Rosana over. Soon after, they had a son named Geronimo, but not long after, problems began to show. Jose was a controlling and jealous man who often belittled Rosana and her family. This abuse eventually became physical, leaving Rosana feeling trapped and fearful. Jose's intimidating presence, reinforced by owning 2 guns, ensured he kept control, a situation that Rosana's family was painfully aware of. It was common for Jose to show off his guns either when someone visited their home or when he was out visiting others. One time while painting their house, Rosana's brother Oscar witnessed Jose physically assaulting her, telling her to shut up before hitting her. On another occasion, her father noticed bruises on Rosana's back, and she simply told him that Jose had dragged her across the pavement. Despite these troubles, Rosana and Jose welcomed their second child, and Rosana tried her best to make the relationship work, hoping to provide a stable home for their children. However, her efforts were constantly undermined by José's temper and disrespectful behavior. To make matters worse, José's mother, Elsa, controlled the household from afar, making decisions about their lives during her short visits to Argentina. By 2006, Rosana had endured unbearable abuse and finally reported José for domestic violence. Her family was largely unaware of the full extent of her suffering. Months later, Rosana filed a second complaint, including a request for a medical examination due to her injuries. Following this, she opened up to her sister Monica, and they made a pact to communicate whenever something happened. Monica became her sanctuary and support. Whenever life with José became unbearable, Rosana would visit Monica's apartment with her children, though José dictated when they must return, often with death threats. At times, he verbally abused Rosana, criticizing her abilities as a mother. Eventually, she decided to move in with Monica and the children, while José stayed at his house. After some time, Rosana filed another complaint and sought a divorce, resulting in a restraining order against José. They only met at a neutral property in El Remanso, Exaltación de la Cruz, for child visitation, as arranged by the court. It was there that Rosana shared the extent of her ordeal with the gardener, Daniel Gonzalez, who lived nearby, was married and had a daughter. Rumors suggested a secret romance between Rosana and Daniel, but this was never confirmed. José's threats continued, and Rosana even played a voicemail for her brother Oscar in which José talked about killing her. In mid-2007, while hanging out with friends at a bar, Rosana met Oscar Lugo. He was 32, lived in Marino, and worked in a sewing workshop. They hit it off immediately, exchanged numbers, and started dating. Oscar Lugo was old-fashioned, a gentleman who was kind, attentive, and listened to her. For 29-year-old Rosana, who had been through endless turmoil, it felt like she was rediscovering a nearly forgotten life. Oscar Lugo noticed Rosana's lack of confidence and the fear in her. By December 2007, he had joined her for the holiday festivities, even dressing up as Santa Claus to delight her sons. But the happiness was marred by José, who kept tabs on Rosana's every move. Aware of her new relationship and panicked by the looming divorce, José called Rosana, offering her a truck to end things with Oscar Lugo. She refused, and it was her new boyfriend who accompanied her to the hospital during a severe nervous breakdown. Out of options, José hatched a plan financed by his mother Elsa. They meticulously arranged to hire a hitman whose identity remains a mystery. On January 16, 2008, Rosana and her sister Monica went to El Remanso to pick up her sons, age 4 and 3. The handover was delayed by José with excuses. At 9:15 p.m., José called, claiming Geronimo had a fever and he would take him to the hospital and return him the next day. However, Rosana insisted on having the children back to care for Geronimo herself. The call was brief and then she went inside. Around 9:53 p.m., Rosana texted Oscar Lugo with a casual message about their plans for the next day. At 10 p.m., Rosana and Monica sat down for dinner. At 10:50 p.m., José called again, and this conversation turned into a deadly trap. Rosana went out to the garden for better reception, where a shadowy figure emerged from behind the trees and shot her 4 times with a .45 caliber gun. Hearing the shots, Monica screamed, saw Rosana stagger and collapse. Frantic, Monica tried calling 911 without success, then asked her boyfriend to alert the police. Meanwhile, Oscar Lugo, unaware of the events, tried contacting Rosana at 11 p.m. and failing that, tried to reach Monica, but got no response. Police investigations revealed that the shooter had entered from an adjacent vacant lot. A witness saw someone fleeing through a gap in the fence, but couldn't provide a clear description due to the darkness. That night, José was questioned and appeared shocked. After requesting a lawyer, he let the lawyer handle the proceedings and left. The next day, during further searches, a red sweater was found, which Rosana's relatives believed belonged to José, making him the prime suspect in their eyes. The case grabbed media attention and shocked the country, becoming scandalous as José and his mother publicly claimed his innocence and talked badly about Rosana, suggesting she had multiple lovers and those men should be investigated instead. After the incident, Daniel, the gardener, became reclusive, speaking to no one. On the night of Rosana's funeral, Ronaldo noticed Jose nearby in a truck, watching from a distance without joining or expressing condolences. Jose's defense later targeted Monica, Rosana's sister and the sole witness, raising doubts about her by questioning why there were no blood stains on her clothes and why she ran for her phone instead of helping her sister. However, this theory was unsupported. The investigators argued the weapon was too heavy for a woman to manage. An important point raised by the detectives was that anyone familiar with the house would know Rosana needed to go outside to get a cell signal, indicating significant premeditation in the crime. During the investigation, Rosana's sons were cared for by their father and grandmother Elsa, while their grandmother Graciela could see them. However, Monica and Oscar were denied access, with Jose claiming serious safety concerns for his sons. Despite the legal restrictions, the children expressed a desire to see their Aunt Monica, leading Jose to occasionally allow visits. Monica used these opportunities to take them to a psychologist. Eventually, Graciela obtained visitation rights, though not guardianship. In an interview at the time, Jose alleged that Rosana had 4 lovers, all with legal troubles. According to Jose, Rosana was intimate with these men to uncover their secrets, which she then used to blackmail them for benefits. Meanwhile, after receiving threats, Oscar was made a protected witness in his sister's case, requiring him to wear a tracking bracelet and being assigned police protection. As 2007 was ending, the investigators had yet to find solid evidence to charge any of the suspects. However, a significant turn came a year after the murder when Jose was arrested in January 2008, charged with aggravated homicide due to their relationship, premeditation, and the involvement of 2 or more people. The preliminary hearings began on January 28, 2008. Ronaldo, Graciela, Monica, and Oscar testified about Jose's repeated threats, violent nature, and use of firearms for intimidation. The mother also presented the last text messages from her daughter to the prosecutor. After the hearing, Ronaldo expressed feeling a heavy burden, but found relief in fulfilling his duty to his daughter's memory. The next day, Oscar Lugo, Rosana's former boyfriend, testified against Jose, describing him similarly to the family's view. He mentioned Jose's attempts to tarnish his and Rosana's reputations, adding that Rosana believed Jose's claims of her having multiple lovers were a tactic to discredit her in their impending divorce. Jose's lawyer downplayed the allegations of Jose's emotional instability and aggression, suggesting they were echoing Rosana's narrative. On February 7, 2008, a 12-hour investigative session took place, with Jose's mother traveling from the United States for her turn to testify. Meanwhile, a new search at El Remanso yielded no new evidence. By then, Rosana's family suspected her mother-in-law's involvement in the plot. As a result, Ronaldo and Graciela's lawyer considered requesting her arrest. In defense, Jose and his mother's lawyer argued that Jose's mother had stated in her testimony that she bought houses for her grandchildren, believing the divorce settlement would not harm them. It was also added that it was untrue that Jose's mother and Rosana had a bad relationship. The media continued to debate the circumstances of Rosana's death and the notion that Jose orchestrated the murder, hinting at another perpetrator. Despite the suspicions, Jose was released on bail and took care of his children. Later, the court deemed the police protection for Oscar, Rosana's brother who worked as a taxi driver, unnecessary. On the early morning of July 5, 2008, Oscar was attacked by 2 armed men. They beat and threatened him for an hour before abandoning him in a vacant lot, where he was found thanks to his protective witness tracking bracelet. Though not severely injured, he was deeply shaken. Amidst the grief of losing Rosana and the ongoing custody battle, the family faced renewed fear, a fear that was palpable and justified. With no one convicted and ongoing threats, the demand for justice grew more urgent, yet the judicial system's slow pace was disheartening. Years passed, and by 2012, the trial and custody dispute dragged on. For years after the attack, Oscar used his visitation rights to take his nephews to play soccer, sharing a memorable hug with the 6- and 7-year-old boys. In April 2013, the oral trial started. Jose maintained his innocence. In May, Proceedings were delayed when Jose suffered a stroke, pushing the final verdict to November 2013. The judges found that the murder was meticulously planned, resembling organized crime. Jose and Elsa were implicated in choosing the time and place for the attack, knowing that a phone call would lure Rosanna outside, making her vulnerable. The court found financial motives behind the murder, as Jose did not want to split the marital assets. Jose and Elsa were sentenced to life imprisonment. The conviction was upheld by the higher court, highlighting Jose's threats, the domestic violence endured by Rosanna, and the dominant influence of his mother. The actual shooters were never identified. In 2015, Jose and Elsa received house arrest, Jose due to his health and Elsa due to her age, allowing the kids to live with them again. The media continued to cover the children's story for years, during which time Monica and Graciela had no contact with them. The boys shuffled between homes known to their father, but strangers to Rosanna's family. In the second week of January 2017, the court allowed the children to spend a weekend with their maternal grandparents for the first time. The Galliano family prepared their home with fresh paint, a thorough cleaning, and decorations. They hung balloons and made a colorful welcome sign. Graciela prepared their favorite dish. That weekend, the Galliano home was filled with joy as the boys played soccer, video games, and even asked to sleep in their grandmother's bed, whom they hadn't seen in over 2 years. On November 24, 2018, Jose died after another stroke. The event was another blow for the children who attended their father's funeral. During the funeral, they expressed their concern about their future with their Aunt Monica. She assured them with calmness and love, promising to support whatever they decided. They chose to live with Monica, who then had to confront Elsa to communicate the boys' decision. Through these and many other instances, it was clear that Monica always acted in alignment with her nephew's wishes, whether they wanted to talk or preferred silence. Monica's primary goal was to provide stability and comfort for the boys. In March 2019, Geronimo chose not to change schools since he was close to his friends and had 2 years left there. So he went back to live with his grandmother, Elsa. Meanwhile, Monica sought custody of the other kid. Things seemed to be stabilizing, but in the last week of November 2019, 87-year-old Elsa was moved from her home to the hospital where she passed away on November 30th. The following month, Monica was granted custody of Wen. By year's end, Geronimo moved in with a friend of his grandmother. Both brothers continued to need psychological support to process their experiences, with Geronimo struggling with depression. Their psychologist noted the overwhelming succession of events they faced. In March 2020, just before pandemic restrictions started, the person Geronimo was living with passed away, leading him to seek refuge with his Aunt Monica until October 2020. Upon turning 18, Geronimo rented a small apartment and lived independently, supported by income from his inherited properties. Monica began legal proceedings to secure their inheritance, fearing they might be deprived of their assets. Wen, meanwhile, showed emotional stability thanks to the support he received and was encouraged to return to therapy whenever needed. Nicola Edgington was a woman deemed as exceptionally dangerous after she assaulted 2 people with a knife. She had previously killed her own mother and was living freely in the community when she committed these chilling new attacks. The day turned nightmarish when Edgington, after taking a bus, randomly targeted 2 individuals on their way to work. Clark, an artist, narrowly escaped death by catching the knife's blade and fending Edgington off. But the horror didn't end there. Edgington, undeterred, struck Hodgkin, a law firm accounts clerk, with such force that she almost decapitated her. Nicola Edgington was born in Britain on September 9, 1980, the eldest of 3 children to Marion and Harry Edgington. Her younger siblings are Tom, 2 years her junior, and Sarah, who was 5 years younger. Not much is known about Nicola's early years, except that her father Harry was a respected foreign correspondent for the British newspaper Daily Mail and often worked from home. Her mother Marion was known for her warm and outgoing personality, making her quite popular in their community. But her brother Tom says Nicola was always quite the troublemaker. He described her as a challenging child whose unruly and confrontational behavior often caused family turmoil and strained her parents' relationship. Eventually, her parents separated. Harry moved to France but stayed in touch with the children. Nicola's troubles weren't confined to home. She was also a constant source of conflict at school. As a result, other parents didn't want their children associating with her, viewing her as a bad influence. At home, Nicola frequently clashed with her mother, who took her to psychologists multiple times, trying to find a reason for her inappropriate behavior. Despite these visits, the professionals always concluded that Nicola was perfectly normal. Her brother later remarked that Nicola was good at pretending to be sane. Nicola's behavior became even more challenging during her preteen years. By the age of 11, she had become completely uncontrollable and would disappear from home for days at a time. In one instance, driven to desperation by her constant escapades, her mother Marion hid all her shoes. Unperturbed, Nicola simply took a pair of her brother's shoes and left anyway. Marion frequently had to call the police to locate her daughter Nicola. It's not clear whether she truly needed assistance or was just causing trouble, but Nicola did once call social services to be moved to a care facility, accusing her mother of improper conduct. Her call led to her being taken away for her safety, but she was sent back home after a few weeks because she was seen as a threat to other children at the facility. Later, Marion sold their home and moved to a remote cabin in East Sussex, hoping for anonymity and a fresh start. She was trying to keep her 12-year-old daughter away from bad influences, including friends with whom Nicola had started drinking, smoking, and staying out late. In this new place, Nicola was enrolled in a local school while her siblings were sent to a boarding school. This move, Marion hoped, would allow her to better manage Nicola and keep the younger children safe. Tom, her brother, later expressed his satisfaction with the boarding school, enjoying the company of peers from stable families and dreading weekends at home due to Nicola's disruptive influence. Meanwhile, Marion continued struggling with Nicola, who left school for good at 15, escalating tensions and even violence at home, once assaulting her mother with a home telephone, leading to police intervention and warnings against such behavior. Nicola eventually moved out of the family home into an apartment in Brighton, arranged by her father. At 17, Nicola fell pregnant and was expecting twins, but the pregnancy was tragically cut short by a violent act from her boyfriend. 2 years later, she got pregnant again by a drug dealer. This baby was born prematurely, but survived. Nicola returned home and her mother helped care for the fragile newborn. Then Nicola began working various jobs, including as a receptionist, salesperson, and pole dancer in nightclubs, where she often used drugs and experienced 2 overdoses. She met her future husband in a club with whom she had her second child. His identity remains undisclosed, but according to Tom, this marriage brought stability to Nicola's life, as her Jamaican husband cherished both children and ensured Nicola took her prescribed medication for behavioral management. However, the stability was short-lived as Nicola stopped her medication, joining an evangelical church, believing faith rather than medicine could control her behavior. Unfortunately, this did not lead to the hoped-for miracle. Instead, Nicola developed a religious delusion, convinced she was surrounded by demons. Apparently, due to immigration issues, Nicola's husband had to return to Jamaica, taking both children with him. However, Nicola later followed him, not exactly to reunite the family. She went to Jamaica and then back to her own country, taking her first child with her, even against her husband's wishes. He was very worried about her mental state. Upon her return to Britain, Nicola's situation didn't get any better, and Marion was deeply concerned for the little one's safety because Nicola was having violent and unstable episodes. Living in constant stress from her daughter's outbursts and fearing for her grandson's safety, Marion made a tough decision to protect him. So when the boy was 5 years old, she entrusted him to social services, and he eventually ended up living in Jamaica with his stepfather. Nicola, who previously had a council-funded apartment because of her children, lost this benefit when they were no longer with her. She had to move back in with her mother, who, despite being scared of her, couldn't leave her daughter homeless. For Marion, the troubles only seemed to increase. Her relationship with Nicola remained fraught, and Nicola's violent behavior continued. Things escalated to the point where, in 2005, Nicola received a legal warning for causing damage to a neighbor's property, where she also allegedly threatened someone with a knife. At that time, a psychiatrist evaluated her and claimed there was no evidence of mental illness, but it wouldn't be long before events suggested otherwise. On November 4th, 2005, Tom and Sarah visited their mother, marking the first time in a long while that the three siblings were together at their maternal home. It was an awkward reunion, so to lighten the mood, Tom invited Nicola to a pub. This move also allowed Sarah to have some peaceful time with their mother. At the first pub, Tom tried to lighten the mood with jokes, but Nicola seemed distracted, focusing on writing in a notebook. They then moved to another venue, where Tom felt relieved as Nicola became more talkative, even mentioning her plans to move back to Jamaica. However, this calm was short-lived, as Nicola was soon thrown out for starting a fight with the owner of the venue. Tom chose to stay and called his mother and sister to join him, and they agreed. However, when they arrived, Marion couldn't find parking, so she dropped Sarah off at the venue and returned home. After a while, Tom and Sarah also decided to head back to their mother's house. Upon entering, Tom immediately noticed something about the guest room's foldable bed. Tom couldn't fully grasp what he was seeing at first. It looked like a pile of clothes with two legs sticking out. He thought maybe Marion had invited someone over to stay. Still uncertain about what he was seeing, he called for his sister. Sarah, less cautious, strode into the room and immediately started screaming at Tom not to enter and to urgently call the police. The legs Tom had seen belonged to their 60-year-old mother, Marion, who was lifeless and had several stab wounds. Nicola was nowhere to be found, but for the siblings, it was clear she was responsible for their mother's tragic end. Later, Tom found a notebook in the house with a list titled, "Condemned People," written by Nicola. At the top of the list was their mother Marion's name, crossed out with Tom's name below it. Though no official source was mentioned, some media reported that the argument between mother and daughter might have started over Nicola's accusation that Marion had estranged her from her son and allegedly removed her from the will. When the authorities arrived at the family home, investigators began collecting evidence while forensic personnel took care of Marion's body, which had 9 stab and puncture wounds inflicted with a kitchen utensil. Meanwhile, the police launched a search for Nicola, who was not at the house. Sarah made several TV appearances, pleading for Nicola to turn herself in. Almost 13 weeks later, on November 21, 2005, Nicola was located on a public transport unit in London. Upon her arrest, she immediately blamed Tom for the fatal attack on their mother. Nicola was then subjected to a psychiatric evaluation at the station, where specialists declared her to be in an actively psychotic state. Subsequently, she was initially taken to prison and later, in February 2006, transferred to a facility for individuals who had committed crimes and suffered from mental health issues. Upon her arrival, specialists deemed Nicola unfit to stand trial, putting the legal proceedings on hold until a new professional assessment could determine her ability to understand her situation and actively participate in the judicial process. This milestone was reached in October 2006 when Nicola faced trial for her mother's death. She pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The psychiatric report presented at the trial stated that at the time of the incident, she was suffering from an acute psychotic episode compounded by her pre-existing and persistent emotionally unstable personality traits. The mental health expert attending her recommended a prolonged stay in a secure hospital for further risk assessment and long-term rehabilitation. The judge of the case sentenced Nicola to an indefinite detention in psychiatric care at the Braxton Center. Following this decision, her siblings, Tom and Sarah, expressed relief that Nicola was finally in a place where she could not harm anyone else and receive the desperately needed help. From then on, Nicola would be treated with antipsychotic and mood-stabilizing medication. During this time, Nicola disclosed that her father had abused her in early childhood, a claim that was never confirmed and always denied by Harry. Nonetheless, Nicola consistently raised concerns among the staff attending to her. She exhibited disruptive, abusive, and rude behavior, staunchly refusing to acknowledge the crimes she committed against her mother. She was obsessed with progressing quickly through treatment with the sole aim of being discharged, causing numerous challenges for the medical staff managing her case. The staff responsible for Nicola were constantly on high alert due to her interactions with male patients at the mental health center. Despite concerns, by mid-2007, Nicola was allowed supervised outings, which only raised alarms due to her deemed inappropriate behavior in the community. In November 2007, Nicola was moved within the facility to a unit allowing more independent living, not because of improved condition, but to free up a bed. In her new setting, Nicola's behavior continued to worry staff as she started a new relationship with another male patient, and her mood fluctuated with medication adjustments. Yet on September 29, 2009, 3 years after being incarcerated for the heinous crime against her mother, controversial decisions were made about her care. After meetings, Nicola was conditionally discharged to a subsidized apartment. Nicola expressed concern about being alone at night in the new place, but the assessment team felt 24-hour supervision was unnecessary, devising a contingency plan for emergency assistance. For 2 years, she lived in a facility designed to help adults with mental health issues live independently. With just an intercom system for security, Nicola shared the residence with 3 other tenants in separate apartments. During this time, Nicola received regular visits from her psychiatrist and social worker, along with clinic appointments. She was permitted to visit her children and husband in Jamaica twice, where her husband noted her aggressive behavior, which she denied. By 2011, at 31, Nicola planned to leave the facility, with supervisors believing she needed minimal support. However, the reality was different. Nicola was out of control, having relationships with at least 2 men, one being a co-resident, breaching the house rules and showing her disregard for regulations. In March 2011, suspecting she was pregnant by one of these men, Nicola's psychiatrist advised stopping her mood-stabilizing medication for the baby's sake. After a miscarriage, she did not resume her antipsychotic medication. Around the same time, Nicola claimed to have received abusive messages from a gym employee she might have had a relationship with. Records vary, but between September and October 2011, Nicola messaged her brother Tom via a social network, seeking help and mentioning her miscarriage, missing their mother, and lamenting that no one cared for her like Marion did. She ended her message with, "I love you," giving Tom her phone number, urging him to keep their conversation from their father. Tom's response was harsh. He reminded her of the crimes she committed against their mother and expressed relief over her miscarriage, suggesting that people like her should be sterilized. He concluded by telling her to end her own life. Following this, Tom contacted Nicola's mental health team, requesting a reassessment, though it is unclear if this was acted upon. After receiving Tom's harsh response, Nicola appeared to be in crisis, contacting the police multiple times and even showing up at their station in person. Each time, she told a different story. Once she claimed someone was threatening her life. Another time, she alleged that 2 drug addicts had invaded her apartment and refused to leave, possibly stealing from her. Initially, the police responded but found no evidence of her claims and gradually paid less attention to her reports. Nicola couldn't seek help from her support worker because it was closed on weekends. She turned again to the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God, a controversial institution she had attended before attacking her mother. But this didn't seem to provide the support she needed. Things took a more dramatic and dark turn on Monday, October 10th, 2011. Early at 3 a.m., Nicola took a taxi and asked to be taken to hospital. Upon arrival, she claimed the hospital was closed and decided to leave, even though the taxi driver saw that the hospital was open. He noticed Nicola had her head down and was drooling. The driver took her back to the taxi service office, where an argument ensued over Nicola's inability to pay the fare. She was trembling and distressed, repeatedly stating she needed to be admitted. Around 4:30 a.m., the police were called, and a patrol picked her up from the taxi service office and took her to Queen Elizabeth Hospital. There, Nicola said she didn't feel safe and wanted to leave. The officers got her inside before leaving the scene. Nicola tried to call her community psychiatric nurse, who was off sick, and texted her social worker to confirm a scheduled meeting for that day. She also attempted to contact the Braxton Center without success. Shortly after, Nicola asked the Queen Elizabeth receptionist if she needed to kill someone to get attention and mentioned she was hearing voices. The receptionist asked for her patience. Nicola then called the emergency number stating she felt like she did when she had previously killed someone. The dispatcher promised to send officers, but the police decided not to go. Nicola called the emergency line again 20 minutes later, claiming she was a criminal and wanted to be arrested before she hurt someone. The police deemed it unnecessary to respond. Nicola made 2 more emergency calls, repeating that she was a dangerous schizophrenic and felt like she did when she killed her mother. The police didn't go, opting to call the hospital instead, where staff assured them Nicola was under control. At 5:30 a.m., a mental health nurse assessed her. Nicola said she hadn't slept for weeks and needed to be admitted. The nurse told her to wait for some paperwork. An hour later, security escorted Nicola to the psychiatric unit of the hospital. At 6:40 a.m., a psychiatrist greeted her, but it seemed to be a shift change, and she wasn't immediately assessed. Just after 7 a.m., Nicola pushed through a supposedly secure but faulty door and left the hospital undetected. Shortly after Nicola's escape, the doctor noticed her absence and alerted the police, who then conducted a background check and realized Nicola had a psychiatric history and had been convicted for the murder of her mother. By then, it was too late. Nicola was already out of control. Security cameras later traced Nicola's movements. She took 2 buses and arrived in the city center at 8:25 a.m. She then went to a supermarket where she either bought or stole a large 30-centimeter kitchen knife. The store's cameras captured her heading towards the women's restroom with the knife in a bag and later leaving without the bag, having concealed the knife in her clothing. At 8:29 a.m. at a bus stop, Nicola encountered 22-year-old Carrie Clark, who was listening to music and rolling a cigarette. Nicola suddenly attacked her, screaming and stabbing with the hidden knife. Carrie managed to grab the knife blade with her hands, preventing it from reaching her chest, and kick Nicola away, questioning her sanity. Nicola oddly claimed she wasn't crazy and demanded her weapon back, which Carrie refused, leading Nicola to walk away. This, however, wasn't the end. As witnesses rushed to aid Carrie, who had severe cuts on her hands, Nicola entered a butcher's shop and stole another knife. She then approached another bus stop where 58-year-old Sally Hodkin was waiting. Without warning, Nicola savagely attacked Sally, targeting her neck and fatally wounding her. Nicola then fled the scene. Security footage showed her running away and entering a store to hide. The situation, already dire, could have worsened, but police were already in the area due to the first attack. A man seen following Nicola in the footage directed the officers to her hiding spot. By 9:40 a.m., police had apprehended Nicola behind the store. She was calm during the arrest and didn't resist. Nicola was taken back to the psychiatric hospital to manage her crisis, and it was clear she would need significant time before being fit to stand trial for these crimes. While investigators processed the crime scenes and handled Sally's body, the shocking news of the attack spread, causing public dismay at the violence against innocent people. Sally, described as a devoted mother and loving grandmother awaiting 2 more grandchildren, would tragically never meet them. The legal proceedings to determine Nicola's fate started to move forward by the end of 2012 and into 2013, with her pleading not guilty to murder and attempted murder charges. The prosecution argued that Nicola suffered from a borderline personality disorder and had acted deliberately on that tragic day. In contrast, the defense claimed she was schizophrenic and had diminished responsibility due to her mental health issues. During the trial, the jury and attendees heard from Carrie Clark, who detailed the harrowing experience of Nicola's attack, describing the physical and mental scars it left, including the loss of her sense of safety in public. The prosecution also presented the gruesome details of Sally's murder, highlighting the severity of the neck wounds that led to her almost instant death. Testimonies included the senior medical officer at the mental health unit at the time, who recounted contacting the police immediately after Nicola's escape to ensure her swift return to the hospital, despite not initially perceiving her as an emergency threat. Nursing staff admitted that Nicola escaped through a faulty door supposed to be locked, contradicting their initial statements that they tried to prevent her escape. a claim disproved by security footage. A forensic psychiatrist testified for the prosecution, challenging the diagnosis of Nicola's mental condition, asserting her actions were deliberate and not of someone unaware of their actions. The defense maintained Nicola's mental unaccountability, recounting her late 2011 religious delusions, including her involvement with a non-traditional church linked to the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God, known for exorcism rumors. Nicola reportedly believed in a demon guarding God's throne, represented on earth by the police, and had apocalyptic visions excluding her from salvation. The defense argued that Nicola's paranoid schizophrenia and other mental health issues meant she had diminished responsibility at the time of the attacks. After hearing from all parties and witnesses and examining the documentary evidence, the jury retired to deliberate in early February 2013. They returned after 5 hours and 24 minutes, finding Nicola guilty of the charges against her. Following the verdict, Sally's family, who had stoically endured hearing about the brutal attack that led to her death during the trial, released a statement honoring Sally and questioning why Nicola had been released so soon after killing her own mother. They described Sally as a loving, attentive person, a fantastic mother and grandmother, and an unparalleled friend. They expressed their daily remembrance of her, and the deep miss felt by everyone who knew her, asserting that Nicola should never be released to ensure public safety. The guilty verdict meant Nicola faced a life sentence, with the judge's decision pending on the minimum term before parole eligibility. In March, the judge determined Nicola must serve at least 37 years in prison, meaning she would be nearly 70 years old before potential release. Describing Nicola as manipulative and exceptionally dangerous, the judge emphasized her responsibility for the heinous acts committed. Tom, Nicola's brother, also publicly criticized her quick release after killing their mother, expressing disbelief over her freedom to harm again and stressing the need to prevent such occurrences. He empathized with the victims, noting the trauma of losing their mother and suggesting greater agony for Sally's family, given the preventability of the crime. Tom disclosed that their mother had feared Nicola might end her life, yet felt responsible for her care. Following the tragic events, detailed case analyses concluded the entire system bore responsibility for the tragedy. The police failure to conduct appropriate checks on Nicola on the day of the incident, stating that a simple online system review would have revealed her dangerousness, given her prior conviction for murdering her mother. In November 2013, the Court of Appeal dismissed an attempt by Nicola's lawyers to overturn her sentence. Subsequent official investigations and an independent report concluded that Nicola's deadly actions resulted from a series of health and security service failures. Notably, the only reported penalties were the firings of nurses who initially lied about trying to prevent Nicola's escape from the psychiatric area. Interestingly, in September 2023, Nicola's case was sent back to the appeals court, prompted by concerns that jurors might have been misled about her mental health. The case of Luz Maria Lopez. Luz Maria Lopez was born on March 17, 1995, in the small town of San Cristobal, Verapaz. Her family was simple and modest. Her parents were Amarales and Brian Lopez. Luz Maria was the youngest of 2 children. She grew up with her older brother, Omar. As an infant, she faced a life-threatening intestinal obstruction. To save her, doctors performed a complex operation without guarantees of success. Her mother prayed fervently for her recovery and firmly believed that her daughter would pull through, and she did. The surgery at such an early age did not impact Luz Maria's development. Throughout her school years, Luz Maria actively engaged in sports, especially gymnastics and athletics. She also had a passion for classical choreography. Her creative nature made it easy for her to communicate and connect with different people, quickly forming friendships. Academically inclined towards the humanities, she excelled in her studies. After finishing school, Luz Maria contemplated higher education and opted for a prestigious state university. She decided to pursue a law degree and later specialized in criminalistics due to her genuine interest in this field. A significant moment occurred during her student years when Luz Maria and her mother visited a car dealership in Coban, the capital of Alta Verapaz. It was Omar's 25th birthday that year, and they wanted to gift him something special, a motorcycle he had always dreamed of. At the showroom, a polite and attentive young consultant named Jorge welcomed them. He showed them various models and provided recommendations. Mother and daughter chose a model but wanted to consult with the head of the family before finalizing their decision. They left with a business card from the dealership and Luz Maria's phone number for future reference. Soon after, Jorge called Luz Maria, not about the motorcycle but on more personal note. Over time, these calls became frequent until Jorge mustered the courage to ask her out for coffee. It was clear that he had a strong attraction to the beautiful, sultry brunette, but he was unsure how to initiate their acquaintance. Luz Maria also found this handsome young man appealing. When he proposed they meet, she agreed readily. Although the young man was a year younger than her, this slight difference didn't hinder their growing connection. Their romantic relationship blossomed almost immediately. Both felt it was love at first sight and believed in a future filled with happiness together. After only a few months, the couple chose to live together despite their parents' disapproval of such haste. Soon after, they were married. Approximately 6 months later, they held a wedding ceremony, inviting only their closest friends and family to celebrate with them. However, issues arose on the day of the wedding. The banquet venue encountered a problem, which almost disrupted the entire event. The couple had to pay a significant additional amount to ensure the celebration proceeded as planned. Little is known about Joj, Luz Maria's chosen partner. Born in 1996 in Santa Catalina, Latina, in central Guatemala, Jorge was the eldest of 2 sons and grew up with his brother Pablo. Their family often faced financial hardships, balancing on the edge of poverty. Thus, there wasn't enough money for luxurious clothes or expensive toys. It barely covered necessities. Despite these challenges, Jorge lacked aspirations for a better life and didn't focus on studying or securing a decent job. People who knew Forge personally described him as withdrawn and sometimes even aggressive due to his trouble controlling emotions. Consequently, he didn't have many friends and struggled with relationships. Nonetheless, meeting his dream girl sparked determination within him. He worked hard to win her love and hurried to marry her out of fear she might change her mind. It's worth mentioning that Luz Maria's parents were skeptical about their son-in-law right from the beginning. Overall, despite some initial challenges and doubts from others around them, their connection remained strong and unwavering. Something about this young man didn't sit right with them. They couldn't pinpoint it, and they couldn't convince their daughter not to marry him. Soon after the wedding, she became pregnant. Without a university degree, finding a good job was tough. Employers didn't want to hire someone inexperienced and expecting a baby, so she had to settle odd jobs. Her husband, by that time, had lost his job too, and wasn't eager to find a new one. When their daughter Alice was born, money became really tight. With both of them unemployed, they struggled to pay rent or even buy food and basic necessities. Then Jorge suggested moving in with his parents temporarily. Luz Maria Lopez resisted for a long while, but eventually agreed. They couldn't stay on the streets with a baby. Luz Maria Lopez's mother was aware of her daughter's family issues and often urged her to come back home. But Luz Maria Lopez kept saying things would get better with her husband and there was no need to worry. One day, the mother decided to visit her daughter and granddaughter at her son-in-law's parents' house and found a distressing scene. Luz Maria Lopez was in terrible shape, eating just once a day and that too very little. However, Shore's family didn't see the need to provide for their unemployed daughter-in-law. It's terrible. Luz Maria Lopez was breastfeeding Alice, so lack of proper nutrition threatened both their healths. But inadequate meals were only part of the myriad problems she faced in her mother-in-law's home, as she later discovered. She was constantly humiliated and even beaten by her husband's younger brother. He was irritated by the crying of the child and the presence of items in the house. His frustration him to repeatedly throw these items at Maria. On one occasion, he launched a baby bottle that struck little Alice, who was in her mother's arms. Jorge witnessed all of this, but never once stood up for his wife and daughter, acting as if they were strangers to him. Maria's mother persuaded her to take her granddaughter and return to the parents' house. Soon after, Jorge appeared at their doorstep, asking his wife to come back, promising he would find employment. She agreed, but only on the condition that they would rent an apartment and live separately from Jorge's parents. When Maria successfully defended her diploma, she fulfilled a long-time dream by securing a job with the city prosecutor's office. A smart, talented, and responsible young woman, she quickly earned the respect of her colleagues and began moving up the career ladder. Over time, the family's financial situation improved considerably. They could even afford to buy a car for two. However, this improvement was solely due to Maria's diligent work and reputation. Jorge was still searching for himself and preferred living at his wife's expense. He was jealous, lazy, and a domestic type with an explosive temper, which worsened over time. Jorge did not want to work, taking only temporary part-time jobs, if at all. He preferred sitting at home in front of the TV, drinking beer with friends, and spending what his wife earned. Moreover, Jorge was pathologically jealous and tried to control every move of his beloved. He did not permit her to make friends or have lunch with colleagues in cafes or just be somewhere without him. Constantly checking her phone records and reading messages became routine for him. He also forbade her from registering accounts on social networks. At home, when left alone with Maria, Jorge's behavior did not improve in any way. He often created scandals in seemingly calm places, constantly clarified his relationships, and habitually blamed his wife for any problems or family troubles. When they lived at his parents' house, Jorge never stood up for his wife. He just watched as she was humiliated, insulted, and occasionally even beaten by his relatives. Jorge himself also sometimes resorted to violence and didn't see anything wrong with it. He treated Luz Maria as if she were his property, believing she would endure everything and wouldn't leave him. Neighbors frequently heard screams from their home and saw signs of beatings on the young woman's face and body. Luz Maria repeatedly tried to leave her husband and considered filing for divorce. Several times she took her daughter and moved out to live with her parents. However, each time, her husband would go there, literally begging on his knees for forgiveness. Remarkably, each time Luz Maria forgave him and gave him another chance despite her parents urging her to come to her senses and leave the abusive man. On December 15, 2020, after another violent altercation with Jorge, Luz Maria took their 3-year-old daughter Alice, got into the car in tears, and went to her mother's house. The following day, Jorge arrived there. His intentions were unclear, whether he wanted his wife back or simply the car. He claimed he had found a job and assured everyone that their lives would change. Additionally, he promised never to raise a hand against his wife again. Surprisingly, Luz Maria believed him yet again and returned with him to their rented apartment. In mid-January 2021, Luz Maria called her mother to complain that not only did Jorge fail to secure a job as promised, but had also stolen the money she earned, effectively leaving the family destitute. Her mother felt sorry for her daughter and offered financial help so they could get by until the next salary was received. The women agreed to meet on the morning of January 19th, but Luz Maria did not arrive at the designated time. She decided to visit her daughter's workplace the next day. Upon arrival, she discovered that Luz Maria Lopez hadn't shown up for 2 days, and no one had been able to contact her. At the same time, Jorge, also searching for his wife, appeared at the prosecutor's office. He mentioned that they had argued again and thought Luz Maria Lopez had gone to her mother's house. He figured she wasn't answering because she was upset with him. The concerned mother immediately felt something was wrong and suspected her son-in-law might be lying. She went straight to the police to initiate a search for Luz Maria Lopez without delay. That same day, an alert system named Isabel Claudina, originally Alert to Isabel Claudina, was activated nationwide. This emergency system was triggered for young women reported missing. When the extensive search began, Luz Maria Lopez's husband was quickly identified as the prime suspect, though it would actually be more accurate to say he was the only suspect. Luz Maria Lopez had no known enemies or reasons someone would kidnap her, and Jorge was the last person seen with her alive. Naturally, he denied any involvement in her disappearance, asserting that he himself was distraught over her absence and irritated by being labeled as the main suspect. Despite his denials, Jorge repeatedly contradicted himself during questioning and failed to provide a clear explanation as to why he hadn't informed the police on the actual day of his wife's disappearance. He claimed he believed she was at his mother-in-law's home, but didn't call or visit there. While law enforcement searched for witnesses and combed through areas for any clues, a breakthrough came on January 22nd. Municipal workers accidentally discovered Luz Maria Lopez's body while responding to a call about a clogged storm drain near a road. Upon lifting the grate to access the drain, they found an unusual large plastic bag containing something black inside. Upon closer inspection, the observers were horrified to discover charred human remains. They promptly reported this gruesome finding to the authorities. Upon arrival, the police officers speculated that the body might belong to Luz Maria Lopez, who was widely looking for her after nationwide. Forensic experts later verified that the remains were indeed those of a young woman. Her parents and brother, despite the severe disfigurement caused by the fire, confirmed her identity with certainty. What's coincident is that the package containing her remains was found on the same street as the prosecutor's office where she had worked. This location lacked surveillance cameras and lighting. Despite how badly burned the body was, pathologists determined that she had been severely beaten before death. The cause of death was asphyxia, indicated by internal hemorrhages, multiple fractures sustained while she was still alive, and particles of dried blood in her nose and mouth. Additionally, there were deep marks on her neck pointing to strangulation. At the time of discovery, no new suspects had emerged in the investigation. The victim's parents firmly believed that their son-in-law had brutally murdered their daughter. Consequently, Uriai was taken into custody while authorities examined his motive for committing such a heinous act. In addition to the investigation, psychologists and criminal analysts needed to scrutinize the marriage and family dynamics closely. During these proceedings, Ms. Lopez submitted a disturbing audio recording sent anonymously by a neighbor familiar with her daughter's household. This person had frequently witnessed domestic disputes between Luz Maria and her husband, but decided to record one such incident without realizing it would culminate in murder. The audio captured Luz Maria desperately crying for help amid little sobs in the background. Ms. Lopez was horrified by what she heard and lamented that if this witness had alerted authorities earlier, her daughter might still be alive today. The individual who captured the recording did not contact the police, nor did they visit the residence from which the distressing screams emanated. The authorities were unable to trace this anonymous person, making it impossible to involve them as a witness in the investigation. Consequently, the audio recording was included in the criminal materials. A key witness gave a detailed interview urging all citizens to stay vigilant and report incidents of domestic violence to the police rather than merely documenting them with devices such as cameras. This approach, she stated, could potentially save lives. This crime triggered significant public outrage, steadily prompting thousands to take to the streets in protest, demanding that the perpetrator be brought to justice. Jorge was promptly taken into custody but persistently denied any wrongdoing. He claimed he personally drove his wife to work on that ill-fated day when she subsequently vanished. Street CCTV footage indeed captured their vehicle heading towards Luz Maria Lopez's workplace that morning. However, due to tinted windows, it was indiscernible how many individuals were inside. None of the video clips showed the car stopping or Luz Maria exiting. Further discoveries were uncovered at the couple's rented home, where faint traces of cleaned blood and drag marks were detected. These findings suggested that a violent crime likely occurred there. An additional piece of evidence came when microscopic fragments of burnt flesh were discovered in the trunk of their family car. Moreover, during their search, investigators paid close attention to a recent purchase made by Jorge and his wife, a double orthopedic mattress. It wasn't so much about the mattress itself, but rather its dense polyethylene wrapping, which analysis revealed had been used to transport Luz Maria's burnt remains. Additionally, several neighbors testified about having repeatedly heard Jorge verbally abusing and threatening his wife with death just days before her sudden disappearance. Her husband had shouted that he would kill her if she decided to leave him, and that he would hide her body so that no one would ever find it. Based on the data collected by expert criminologists, as well as the testimony of several witnesses, the investigation presented a gruesome picture of the crime. The murder occurred on the night of January 19, 2021. The day before, the couple had a big fight, and Jorge once again resorted to violence with his fists. He had previously had issues with his temper, but this time he went into an uncontrollable rage. He struck his wife multiple times, causing her to scream and cry for help. These screams were heard by their neighbors, but nobody called the police. During the beating, Hyohei broke his wife's nose and caused a head injury. After this brutal assault, he strangled her with his bare hands and then attempted to dispose of the body. He dragged it into the backyard, doused it with campfire liquid, and set it on fire. However, Jorge did not anticipate how smoky and foul-smelling the burning flesh and hair would be. Concerned that neighbors might notice and call the fire department or police, he quickly extinguished the fire. He wrapped the charred remains in plastic and sought a secluded location where he believed the body would never be found. The most horrific aspect was that Jorge committed these acts in front of their young daughter. Despite her tender age, she somewhat comprehended what was occurring. The child, 3.5 years old at the time, witnessed both the beating and subsequent murder, as evidenced by her cries and screams, which were also recorded. Aware of some forensic techniques from his wife's textbooks at home, a fact due to their abundance, Jorge attempted to cover up his crime and establish an alibi. He found a dark stretch of road without lights or video surveillance cameras and disposed of his wife's body in a drainage sewer there, thinking he could go unnoticed. The next morning, he drove to her place of work along the usual route, as if he had taken Maria there just as he did every morning. The following day, he began to simulate an active search for his wife, calling her colleagues, acquaintances, and relatives. The criminal's lawyers delayed the trial as much as they could. They also attempted to throw the investigation off track. They insisted that all the evidence and witness statements were circumstantial, emphasizing that not a single piece of evidence unequivocally proved Georgie's guilt. Defense attorneys tried to get the detention changed to house arrest. They argued that Georges himself was deeply depressed due to being accused of killing the woman he loved and the mother of his child. However, decisive evidence came from data obtained from Maria's phone. All this time, the device was in her husband's possession. On the first day after the crime, several messages were sent from it to different people in an attempt to create the appearance that Maria was still alive. Tracking all movements of the smartphone that day showed it was constantly in the same places as Jorge's phone. Despite this evidence, lawyers tried to turn it in favor of their client, claiming Jorge found his wife's phone and drove around with it searching for her. Yet no one could explain why he was sending messages from it or calling it from his own cell phone. Another proof of guilt was bruises and scratches on Jorge's body found on the day of his arrest. These marks were photographed by experts and indicated that Maria clearly resisted. The most vivid was a scratch on his neck. Unfortunately, particles of Jorge's epithelium under Maria's fingernails couldn't be found because they were destroyed by fire. Despite many controversial points, the prosecutor asked for the maximum possible punishment for Jorge. Court hearings and proceedings were repeatedly postponed due to the raging worldwide pandemic. But in October 2022, Jorge was finally found guilty of his wife's brutal murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison. Although he maintained his innocence throughout, custody of little Alice was given to her maternal grandparents, who admitted their granddaughter now holds the main meaning in their lives. Case of Romina Núñez several years ago literally shocked the whole of Spain with its unimaginable cruelty and cynicism. The very situation in which this unfortunate young woman found herself, we can say, typical. Her husband beat her, and she kept silent, hoping that he would change. However, the denouement of this story shocked even experienced investigators who have seen everything in their practice. The victim's body was never found, only a fragment of it, which the sea threw ashore. But how did it happen? And could the tragedy have been avoided? To answer these questions, you need to understand who Romina was and why she never dared to admit to anyone in what trouble she found herself. Who is Romina Núñez? Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez was born in the fall of 1990 in the city of Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, and was the eldest of two daughters in a poor working-class family. Parents separated when the girls were still young, so their mother, whose name was Miriam Rodriguez, had to raise the children on her own. The woman had to work several jobs at once because her ex-husband did not help them financially at all. and did not show any interest in the fate of the daughters. When she was still a schoolgirl, Romina got a job in order to help her mother and younger sister somehow. At the age of 17, the girl began a romantic relationship with a guy whose name was Christopher. He wooed her beautifully. They made plans for a joint future. But happiness ended as soon as Nunez learned that she was expecting a child and reported this to her lover. The young man immediately gave the chosen one an ultimatum. Either she terminates the pregnancy or they part forever. Romina deeply hurt the words of her lover, but after consulting with her parents, with whom she has always been very close, the girl decided to keep the child. Most of all, she feared that having had an abortion at such a young age will never be able to become a mother again, so there was only one way out. Christopher kept his word. He broke off all relations with the girl and was never interested in her fate, and the fate of his child. Romina, at the age of 18, gave birth to a son whom she named Lucas. However, with the advent of a baby in the family and so deplorable financial situation worsened even more, money is catastrophically lacking. And Mother Romina had denounced support and grandson, moving to Spain. Romina, depressed by the situation, she wanted to somehow correct the situation and help her family, but find a decent job with good pay in Paraguay. She still could not manage. Then the girl called her maternal aunt, who lived in sunny Spain, and the relative invited her niece to her place, assuring her that it would be easier for her to settle down here and that there were more prospects in Europe than in Latin America. Not thinking long, the girl packed only the most necessary things and, having earned an airplane ticket to Spain, went on the road. She left her 2-year-old son in the care of her mother and sister for a while, deciding that she would pick him up as soon as she found a new place to live and a stable job. In the late summer of 2010, Romina flew to Madrid and from there traveled to its suburbs, the provincial town of Alcobendas, where she settled in the house of her aunt. Romina immediately actively began to look for work, and she smiled at her luck. Attractive and sociable beauty got a job as an administrator in a hotel where she received a decent salary. Of the money she sent home, and for the rest rented a separate apartment so as not to embarrass hospitable relatives. Soon, Nunez met a man named Javier, with whom she had a stormy romance. The favorite a few years ago, just like her, emigrated to Europe in search of happiness and a better life. He was a native of the Republic of El Salvador, worked in construction, and seemed to be a serious man. However, when the girl became pregnant, the situation repeated itself. Javier was not ready for the appearance of children, but nevertheless, the couple tried to live together for a while. Unfortunately, soon after the birth of their common son, they finally broke up. The girl was again in a difficult situation because she was in a foreign country with an infant in her arms and simply did not know how to be further. For a while, she returned to her aunt's house, where she was accepted and helped in every way possible. When the boy was only about 6 months old, the young mother went back to work because she could not work. But a few months later, a new shock awaited the girl. For a long time, she ignored the poor health and weakness, writing it off to stress and fatigue. However, when Romina still went to the doctor, she was diagnosed with cancer. The young woman underwent several courses of chemotherapy, lost her hair, lost a lot of weight, but overcame the insidious disease. After treatment, the girl quickly recovered. She continued to work and hid the lack of hair with the help of wigs. Romina believed that the hard trials, which she managed to steadfastly overcome, will certainly be followed by a period of happiness. She saved money and planned to take not only her eldest son, but also her mother and sister to Spain. New lover. In the summer of 2017, at an event where Nunez went in the company of friends, she accidentally met a man named Raul Diaz-Chicon. He was good-looking, able to impress others, had a serious job, and was financially secure. He liked the smiling beauty, and he became interested in her, asking mutual acquaintances. Romina also liked the statuesque beauty, and when he soon asked her out on a date, she gladly agreed. Raul was almost 15 years older than Romina, and he worked as a leading process engineer for a large energy company. He had a couple of failed marriages under his belt and had 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships. But the girl was not intimidated by the age difference at all. As for her personal life, she had a similar situation, with the only difference being that she was raising sons from two failed previous affairs. It only took one date for the couple to realize that they were in love and they didn't want to part with each other anymore. Romina, overwhelmed by her new feelings, literally fluttered around, telling her friends how happy she was. Her new lover gave her small gifts and pleasant surprises almost every day. He arranged romantic dates, sent flowers with touching cards, and said compliments. Romina believed that she had finally met her true love and found a man who would accept her and her sons. However, soon the girl began to reach very unpleasant rumors about her chosen one. In particular, it was said that he was rude and even cruel with his previous spouses, and because of this, in fact, broke up both his marriages. But Núñez did not want to believe it, although she drew attention to the fact that Raúl did not maintain any relations not only with his former wives, but also with his daughters. However, a significant difference in age and the presence of heirs from previous relationships on both sides did not become an obstacle for the lovers. Just 6 months after meeting, they decided to live together and settled in a luxurious villa on the island of Lanzarote, part of the Canary Islands. This place seemed to the girl a real paradise, but her happiness lasted only a short time. From a dream man to a domestic tyrant, first-time lovers lived in threes, along with Romina's youngest son. Raúl tried to treat the child well, and the girl even thought that he would be an ideal father for her boys. She herself, Raúl, promised a long and happy life together, in which she would not need anything, and he would fully provide for her and the children. The girl in love believed the words of the chosen one, and when he offered her to become his lawful wedded wife without hesitation agreed. But only Raúl insisted that they need time for two so that they could be alone and enjoy each other's company in full after the wedding. In fact, he not only did not want to take Romina's eldest child from Paraguay, but also dreamed of getting rid of her youngest son. However, the young mother believed her lover and did not listen to what her friends told her, who noted the strange behavior of the man. In June 2018, Chacon bought for the bride and her child tickets to Paraguay and one return ticket just for Romina. When the girl flew home and told her mother and sister about her chosen one, the women were somewhat confused by Raúl's behavior. They doubted the sincerity of his intentions and assumed that he just wanted to get rid of someone else's child in his house. But the girl was offended by such talk, and she even had a little quarrel with her loved ones. A few days later, she flew back to Spain, promising that in the fall she would fly back for the boys. When Romina returned, a warm welcome awaited her, and for 2 months, she was perfectly happy alone with Raúl. However, in August, just a few days before the wedding, a man brutally beat Romina. This incident was a real shock to her, but the groom literally on his knees begged her forgiveness, promised that such a thing will never happen again, and she believed him. Núñez did not file a police report on her lover and did not tell anyone about what happened, and on August 10th, making up bruises on her face, she went to the wedding with the man who would soon take her life in cold blood. One last trip home. 2 weeks after the wedding, the girl flew back home to Paraguay, not to pick up her sons as she had planned earlier, but just to see her family. Her mother and sister were quite puzzled by the changes that had happened to her in the short time they had not seen each other. Romina looked upset and even lost. She had a noticeable limp, and there were bruises on her neck, which she tried to hide with a scarf. To all questions, Romina either kept silent or claimed that she had accidentally injured herself. Romina spent almost a month at home, which also surprised her relatives as she had just gotten married. However, the newly married wife said that her spouse himself suggested that she visit the children because she had not seen them for a long time and missed them very much. Then Miriam even praised her son-in-law for his generosity. But still, the woman did not understand what was going on and why her daughter looked so unhappy. In mid-September, Romina, secretly from her mother, borrowed money from relatives for a return ticket to Spain because her husband simply refused to pay for her return. This should have been a clear signal that flying back was not worth it. But Núñez still hoped that everything would work out and the marriage would be happy. On September 17th at the airport, her mother, sister, and son saw her for the last time. The mysterious disappearance of a mother of 2 children. Since returning to her husband, Romina's life every day more and more resembled a terrible dream. Raul, as it turned out, used illegal substances, and now he stopped hiding his addiction from his chosen one. Being under the influence of illegal substances, he turned into a real beast and literally tortured his wife. But every time she tried to leave him, the man promised to stop and swore that this would not happen again. Usually after the beatings and threats, there was a temporary lull when the husband became loving and caring again, gave gifts and arranged romantic dates. But such periods became shorter and shorter, and scandals with manhandling occurred more and more often. Shortly before the new year, Romina confessed to her best friend that she is afraid of her husband and believes that one day he may kill her. On December 29th, Raul again beat his wife, so much so that she was forced to seek medical help. The hospital suspected something wrong and wanted to call the police to record the fact of beating. But at that moment, her husband appeared in the department and said that Romina had fallen herself, and there was no need to involve law enforcers. The girl only confirmed his words and, refusing hospitalization, went home. On January 1st, 2019, Miriam, Romina's mother, tried to call her daughter several times, but she did not pick up the phone. Then the woman dialed her spouse's number to find out what was wrong, but there was no answer either. After several days of silence, the mother-in-law sent Raul a message in which she wrote that she was going to go to the police. This time, the son-in-law reacted instantly and called back, saying that he and Romina quarreled on December 31st, after which she packed her things and left him. The man assured that everything is fine. Soon the wife will cool down and return, because before, according to him, this has already happened. But Romina's mother was not convinced by the words of her son-in-law. She felt that something had happened to her daughter and insisted that Raul went to the police. Only on January 8th, under pressure from relatives of the wife, Raul still filed a report on the disappearance of his wife. However, this time he told a slightly different story, adding that after the quarrel, his wife had taken his money, and he thought that Romina might have flown to Paraguay to visit the children, so he was not particularly worried until his mother-in-law called him yesterday. What is Raul hiding? Raul was constantly confused in his testimony and contradicted himself, which caused a lot of questions and suspicions. Then the law enforcers seriously decided to take him seriously, as well as to find out how the couple's life had been. Having questioned friends and relatives, they realized that not everything was not smooth in this marriage. Romina repeatedly complained to loved ones about her husband's abuse, but never went into details. And others often noticed bruises and abrasions on her body. It was decided to put Ciccone under secret surveillance, and all his telephone conversations were tapped. But the man seemed to sense that he was being watched and for a long time behaved extremely cautiously, not giving any clues or reasons to suspect himself of anything. Nevertheless, the investigation continued, and soon it became known about the visit of Núñez to the hospital on December 29th with signs of serious beatings, and how her husband almost forcibly took her away from there, forbidding her to go to the police. And a few months earlier, Romina did file a domestic violence report but withdrew it the next day. A week later, Raul calmed down a bit and, in a telephone conversation with his relative who worked in the police, blurted out that his wife was no longer alive, but her body would never be found. This was a good reason for the man's arrest as the main suspect in the case and his detailed interrogation at the station. The suspect's version of events, according to Raul, his wife had had too much to drink on New Year's Eve and began to scandalize him, demanding that he immediately move her children into their home. And when he said he was not ready for that, she threw a tantrum, started fighting and throwing at him everything she could get her hands on. Then the man allegedly left the house for a couple hours until everything settled down. And when he returned, he found Romina in the bathtub without signs of life. According to his version, the woman suffocated because she was very drunk. But he was afraid that he might be suspected of involvement in her death or even accused of murder. So Raul decided to remove all traces and then report her disappearance. But the way he admitted he had disposed of the body shocked everyone. Sikkim said that he decided to burn the woman's body on a barbecue in the courtyard. And since they lived in a luxury complex with a large surrounding area, the neighbors could not see what he was doing outside his house and could not smell the odor produced by the burning of human flesh. However, Raul miscalculated because the barbecue did not work on the principle of a crematorium, and in a few hours the remains were not burned. Then he took them out of the fire, divided into parts, packed in different bags, and a couple of days later rented a car, which took the dismembered body in the wild and deserted part of the island, where he threw into the sea from the rocks. The search for the body and evidence police spent weeks combing the shoreline in and around the areas where Raul said he dumped bags of his wife's remains. Divers were also involved in the search for body fragments on the bottom, aviation, and a considerable number of volunteers. But all efforts did not bring any results. Meanwhile, on January 16th, Romina's husband was formally charged with domestic violence, as well as the murder of his wife. This came after his home was thoroughly searched using specialized equipment and luminol, which revealed numerous washed-up traces of blood in various rooms. It was also found that the man had been ordering caustic soda used to remove organic contaminants and paint from the internet. As it turned out, in one of the rooms on the second floor, he was so thoroughly mopping up a bloody stain on the flooring that he damaged it and decided to paint over it. According to the version of the investigation, it was in this room that the suspect dismembered the body of his spouse. Moreover, there on the floor was found a broken fragment of Romina's fingernail with traces of blood and Raul's epithelium, which could indicate that the victim was alive and resisted. Also in the bathroom, on the tiles on the wall, they found Romina's contact lens stuck on the wall, which could have gotten there from a strong blow to the face. Unfortunately, despite their best efforts, law enforcers were unable to find any remains. But at this point, the station received a call from a tourist who reported that a lung fragment had been thrown onto the beach. He could not say with certainty whether it belonged to a human or an animal, but, having heard that a body was being searched for on the coast, decided to report his find to the police. Toward the end of February, an expert examination confirmed that the lung fragment found belonged to the missing Romina. Trial and conviction. Despite the evidence found and the results of the examination, Raul continued to insist on his innocence. He stuck to his initial theory that the woman had drowned herself in the bathtub while highly intoxicated. Although evidence found in the house indicated a fierce struggle, the man also said he did not use any implements or tools to dismember the body. He allegedly tried to burn it completely on a barbecue, and afterwards the remains, due to prolonged exposure to the fire, fell apart on their own, and he just put them in bags and took them away. Such a claim was untrue for several reasons. First, the body of the adult Romina could not have been placed on the fixture in his yard. Secondly, even after prolonged exposure to such temperatures, the bones could not become so fragile that they could fall apart without the use of tools. And in order to separate the lung from the body, it was necessary to open the chest, which could not be done with bare hands. The investigation failed to establish how exactly Raul took the life of his wife, but judging by the traces of struggle found in the house, it was suggested that he could beat her to death. There was also no doubt that Ciccone had dismembered her body in the very room where he later had to repaint the floor to cover the bloody traces. Raul's trial was delayed by the COVID pandemic, so the sessions were repeatedly postponed and rescheduled. During this time, Raul changed several lawyers, and under pressure of evidence, he did admit that he had accidentally killed his wife during a scuffle, rather than finding her dead in the bathtub as he had previously claimed. Nevertheless, he continued to insist that she was drunk and violent. It was not until June 2023 that the defendant was finally found guilty, except that the sentence Romina's loved ones considered too lenient. The man was sentenced to 12.5 years for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for proven domestic violence, 1 year for causing serious bodily harm in December 2018 when Romina went to the hospital, as well as several months for abuse of the body. The case of Ariel Castro, the monster from Cleveland and his captives, is a striking example of brutal criminals hiding behind the facade of normalcy. Maniacs like Castro often appear as good, law-abiding citizens, falling neighbors, friends, colleagues, and even close relatives who were unaware of their double lives. Unlike many, Ariel Castro was never a model family man or worker. He was a tyrant to his wife who chose to stay silent about her suffering. Thus, people around them sincerely viewed Ariel as a good-natured, friendly, and helpful neighbor. This perception shattered in the spring of 2013 when the world learned about the Cleveland monster, who had kept 3 girls captive in his home for 10 years. The revelations shook the country, particularly shocking the local residents, as the missing girls were from the same neighborhood and trusted Castro enough to accept rides from him. Remarkably, Castro even participated in the search efforts for his victims, becoming a volunteer, yet no one suspected him. Let's delve into how this criminal managed to stay hidden in plain sight, continue kidnapping girls, and evade detection. Ariel Rodriguez Castro was born on July 10, 1960 in Yauco, Puerto Rico, as the third of 4 children in a poor family. His parents, Liliana Rodriguez and Pedro Castro, constantly fought and eventually divorced before Ariel started school, leaving his mother to care for him and his siblings, O'Neill, Pedro, and Benita. Struggling to make ends meet, the family moved to Reading, Pennsylvania, in southeastern USA. However, they soon moved to the neighboring state of Ohio, finally settling in Cleveland, a city that at the time welcomed migrants from Latin American countries. Pedro Castro also moved to Cleveland with his new wife and their joint children, settling nearby so the children from his first marriage could freely communicate with their father, which Liliana never forbade. Although their father willingly contacted his older children, he never helped them financially. Liliana later remarried, giving Ariel 4 more siblings. Ariel attended Lincoln West High School in Cleveland, graduating in 1978. He studied music and regularly attended church with his family, presenting as a model Christian, but was a domestic tyrant. In his teens, Ariel met a girl named Grimilda Figueroa, whose family lived across the street. They attended the same school, quickly became friends, and later developed a romantic relationship. For a long time, they lived with their parents because they couldn't afford their own place. In the early 1990s, after saving enough money, the couple moved into a house on Seymour Avenue in southwest Cleveland. This 2-story building, erected in 1890 and later reconstructed, had 4 bedrooms, a dining room, 1 bathroom, and a large unfinished basement. According to Grimilda's sister Alida Caballo, Grimilda complained that her life became a nightmare after moving into the new house. Ariel regularly abused her, both physically and emotionally. Grimilda believed things would improve after marriage and children, but the abuse worsened. She hid bruises and abrasions under her clothes, blaming visible injuries on clumsiness. In 1993, Ariel beat Grimilda so severely that she needed medical attention. Grimilda suffered fractured ribs, a broken nose, and broken arms after being pushed down the stairs by her husband. Despite her severe injuries, she refused to file a police report and the incident was hushed up. After receiving medical attention, she returned to her abusive husband. Ariel remained quiet for a while, fearing police attention, but soon realized he could get away with it and continued to beat his wife. In the mid-1990s, he inflicted a head injury that caused a blood clot and an inoperable tumor. Ariel was arrested, but released a day later, as Grimilda did not press charges, and even requested his release. By the late 1990s, Grimilda, tired of the abuse, filed for divorce, secured custody of their 4 children, Arlene, Antonio, Angie, and Amelia, and moved out. Her nightmare continued, as her ex-husband pursued, blackmailed, and threatened her. Grimilda sought a restraining order, which was issued 3 times but revoked each time. She passed away in late April 2012 from complications related to the brain tumor. By then, her children were grown and independent, but maintained a warm relationship with their father. In the early 2000s, lived alone on Seymour Avenue, worked as a school bus driver, played guitar at city festivals, and was known as a good-natured, hospitable neighbor. Nevertheless, there were oddities in Castro's behavior that went unnoticed. For instance, he was prosecuted several times for traffic violations, including speeding and making dangerous U-turns while driving a school bus. These infractions led to fines and a suspension, culminating in his firing in early 2013 after a maneuver endangered his passengers. Ariel frequently changed musical groups due to tardiness and disrupting rehearsals and concerts. After separating from his wife, he never invited anyone inside his house, though he regularly hosted backyard barbecues. His strangeness did not raise concern. He was seen as eccentric but harmless. No one could have guessed the danger behind his friendly facade. His first victim was Michelle Knight. On August 23, 2002, Ariel decided to kidnap and imprison her. Michelle, born on April 23, 1981, in Cleveland, had a troubled youth, often ran away from home, and had a police record. She became a mother early, but lost custody of her son, who was in a shelter. On that fateful day, she was on her way to court to regain custody of her 2-year-old. Ariel, whom she knew as her neighbor and a school bus driver, offered her a ride. He mentioned having puppies at home and invited her to help find them homes. Trusting him, Michelle agreed, but upon entering his house, the kind man turned into a monster. He severely beat and assaulted her, then chained her in the basement. For days, he starved her, deprived her of water, and repeatedly abused her. She was unable to move and begged for her release, promising silence. When Michelle's mother reported her missing, the police did not prioritize her case. Years later, after the terrible truth came to light, police officers admitted that Michelle Knight's case was not a priority, and limited resources were allocated to the investigation. Firstly, Knight was an adult. Secondly, she had previously left home multiple times. Thirdly, she had legal issues. Most importantly, authorities believed she was avoiding court proceedings related to her son's custody. Michelle's relatives tried to find her through their own efforts, involving neighbors, friends, and anyone concerned. At one point, Ariel Castro even helped post flyers with Michelle's photo around the city, all while she remained a prisoner in his basement. The second victim was Amanda Berry. Castro, convinced he was beyond suspicion, decided to kidnap again in spring 2003. Amanda, born on April 22, 1986, was about to celebrate her 17th birthday, but mysteriously disappeared on April 21, 2003. She was working as a waitress and called home after her shift, promising to be there soon. However, Amanda never arrived, and neither did she appear in the following days, months, or years. As Amanda left the restaurant and headed for the bus stop, Ariel drove up with a seemingly harmless offer of a ride home. Since she had been in the same class as his son for several years, she trusted him and accepted. On the way, he deceived her into entering his house, where he brutally beat her and dragged her to the basement, where Michelle had been held captive for months. Amanda faced the same horrific fate, beaten and starved for several days. This time, he chose 14-year-old Georgina Linda Jesus, who was in the same class as his daughter Arlene and was her best friend. On April 2, 2004, two girls walked out of school together, talked for a while, and then each went to their homes. On the corner of West 105th Street, Gina met Ariel, who promised to take her home. She knew him since childhood, was her best friend's father, so without hesitation she got into his car immediately. Even though it was daytime and no one witnessed the kidnapping, the streets were empty. When it became known that Gina was missing, there was no warning to Amber, making her parents angry. The story aired on the Fox television show, America's Most Wanted, rerun 2 more times in 2005 and 2006. The disappearance was linked to Amanda's kidnapping a year earlier in September. But Castro remained unsuspected. Despite this, he voluntarily participated in the search for the missing girls. He treated Gina like the other victims, keeping them imprisoned in his home. Although a passerby saw a middle-aged Hispanic man and a sketch resembling Castro was drawn, he was never a suspect. For over 10 years, he regularly beat, abused, and starved his victims to mentally break them down, punishing any disobedience or escape attempts to prevent thoughts of death. Running away. Michelle, the first and oldest victim, suffered the most, undergoing public beatings to intimidate others. Finally, he moved them from the dark basement to a second-floor room with a view of the backyard. Knight recalls that she became pregnant by her abuser at least 5 times during her incarceration. However, each time it became obvious Ariel terminated the pregnancy in the most brutal way. He starved the girl and kicked her in the stomach until she miscarried. After one of these tortures, she almost died due to severe bleeding. But on September 3, 2013, just a month after he began serving his life sentence, the Cleveland monster was found hanging from a sheet in his prison cell. All attempts to revive him were unsuccessful. He was 53 years old at the time of his death. Michelle Knight, after her release, preferred to change her name and place of residence. She did not give interviews, but a few years later published a book in which she recounted all the horrors she had experienced in the Castro home. Her child was adopted after his mother disappeared. The woman later tracked down his adoptive parents, but it is not known whether she was able to establish contact with her now adult son. Barry and Jesus received diplomas from John Marshall High School in 2015 because they never had time to graduate. Gina later volunteered on the Amber Alert Committee, and Barry joined Fox affiliate WJW in Cleveland in 2017, where she hosts a missing persons column. Castro family members disowned Ariel, condemned his actions, and apologized to his victims and their families. The perpetrator's eldest daughter, Amelia, is now serving a 25-year prison sentence for assault and attempting to take a man's life. His youngest daughter, Arlene, apologized to former best friend Gina for the way her father treated her. Castro's son, Antonio, said he had been to his father's house and saw that some rooms were locked and inaccessible, but his parent explained it was because he was saving money on heating. In 2018, Michelle published a book titled Life After Darkness, Finding Healing and Happiness After the Cleveland Kidnappings. De Jesus also wrote a book of memoirs titled Hope, a memoir of survival in Cleveland. There have also been numerous documentary projects and 2 feature films about those horrific events. Prisoners of Cleveland, which was released in 2015, and Kidnapped in Cleveland, which was released in 2021. Ariel Castro's case is one of the most horrifying cases in American criminal history. Castro was convicted of kidnapping, holding, and sexually abusing 3 women for more than a decade in his home. Castro kidnapped Amanda Berry, Gina De Jesus, and Michelle Knight at his home in the Tremont section of Cleveland. He kept them in terrible conditions, imprisoned in small rooms and subjected to physical and mental torture. Finally, Barry managed to escape captivity by banging on the door and calling for help. She and the baby girl she gave birth to in captivity were rescued, along with DeJesus and Knight. When the police arrived, they discovered the brutal tragedy that Castro had caused. Castro was later arrested and convicted of a series of crimes, including rape, illegal arrest, and unresolved murder. He received a sentence of life in prison plus 1,000 years. However, he committed suicide in prison in September 2013, just 2 months after his arrest. This case caused a stir and sparked special interest in the issue of domestic violence and human rights protection. Peter William Sutcliffe, also known as Peter William Coonan, was born on the 2nd of June, 1946 in Bingley in the West Riding of Yorkshire, the United Kingdom. Peter was the child of a working-class family. One of the Sutcliffe siblings would later reveal that their father was an abusive alcoholic who routinely punished his children by beating them with a heavy belt strap. Always a loner, Peter left school at age 15 and entered the workforce. He worked in a packaging factory as a driver and as a traveling salesman and in other menial jobs. In the 1960s, he even worked as a gravedigger. This was a tiny but grisly preview of what was to come. Some accounts state that Peter, as a young adult, used the services of prostitutes and that he may have been ripped off or robbed by a hooker at least once. This would explain something of his extreme rage against women of the sex worker class later on. Between the years of 1975 to 1980, Peter Sutcliffe murdered 13 women and attacked and severely injured 10 more. These women were mostly prostitutes living and working in the north of England. This led to his nickname of the Yorkshire Ripper in the press, as the original Jack the Ripper also targeted prostitutes. Sutcliffe was finally arrested in Sheffield by South Yorkshire police for driving with false number plates of all things. He confessed to being the perpetrator of the prostitute murders, claiming that the voice of God had sent him on this mission of cleansing sinful women from the world. At his trial, Sutcliffe pleaded not guilty to murder on grounds of diminished responsibility, but he was convicted of murder on a majority verdict. It was only after his trial and conviction that Sutcliffe began using his mother's maiden name of Coonan. He was transferred from prison to Broadmoor Hospital in March 1984 after being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. All his multiple life sentences were combined and his appeal was dismissed, meaning that he would serve a whole life order and never be released from custody. He died in a hospital from COVID-19 related complications in 2020. Sutcliffe showed a number of the signs of a masculine inferiority complex. The symptoms included sexual voyeurism of strangers, an unhealthy obsession with his mother, and hatred and fear of women. A diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia led to the legal decision that he was mentally incompetent to stand trial. Two of the most high-profile media projects on Sutcliffe are the British television crime drama miniseries This Is Personal: The Hunt for the Yorkshire Ripper, released on ITV in the year 2000, and the Netflix docuseries in 4 parts called The Ripper, released in December of 2020, which gives an overview of the police investigation into the murders. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.